In August 1947, we saw the end of British rule, transfer of power to India and Pakistan. It was very hastily done and very controversial, especially to Punjabis. For Sikhs, half their history was left in Pakistan. Gurdwara Nankana Sahib, Gurdwara Panja Sahib, most of the histories of our gurus was left there. Sikhs saw the loss of that and even changed their ardas, so that one day they could possibly, they're doing ardas, so that one day they could go again there and rejoin this history with the place where they live. Sikhs did lose massively. Not only the history of the gurus, even the capital city of Punjab was Lahore, and Maharaja Ranjit Singh's Darbar and all the history around that was left there. Partition left 1 million people dead through ethnic cleansing, and many more was displaced. It was a horrific period, not just for Sikhs, for Hindus and also Muslims. Chandigarh was built as the new capital city of Punjab, but now Punjab was less than 50% of its former size. However, within 1 month of independence, things changed. The promises that were made to Sikhs, suddenly they started to unravel. In September 1947, the Governor of Punjab, C.M. Trivedi, issued a circular, a confidential circular to the head of Punjab Police, describing Sikhs as criminal people and instructing officials to take special measures against them. In 1949, Sikhs called for the establishment of the Punjabi Suba, fundamental rights along linguistic grounds, the same rights that were given to Tamil Nadu, to Gujarat, to Maharashtra, other states in India. However, these were denied to Punjabis. In 1950, the Sikhs rejected the Indian constitution, which defines them as Hindus and not a separate religion. So the promises that were made about a glow of freedom of Sikhs as an independent religion were completely broken. Even today, if you go to India and get married, you would have to register under the Hindu Marriage Act. Sikhs, while in UK, in America, in Canada, etc., we all recognised as an independent, as a separate religion. In India, you're not. So Sikhs rejected this constitution. In 1951, Hindu groups launched a press campaign to persuade Hindu Punjabis to disown the Punjabi language as their mother tongue. In 1955, Sikhs launched a mass protest for the Punjabi Suba. The Indian government refused to accept recognition of Punjabi as the official language of Punjab. It's quite amazing that really, that even in Punjab, the Punjabi was not considered the official language. And we think that this whole movement turned in 1978 when Sikhs were massacred in Amritsar. The reality is the first time that police fired on Sikh protesters were in 1955. In 1956, Punjab was officially designated as a Hindi-speaking area. In 1957, 200,000 Sikhs went to Delhi to protest against discrimination and human rights violation against Sikhs. So let's bear in mind, this was happening in 1957. 200,000 Sikhs were protesting in Delhi. This is actually 3 times as many people were protesting in Delhi for the Punjabi language as protested for Indian independence pre-1947. So you can tell how much Punjabis really felt this. Between 1960 and 1967, the Sikh civil agitation movement for Punjabi language occurred. During that movement of them 7 years, 60,000 Sikhs were arrested. In 1966, because of that civil agitation movement, it took till 1966 for the Indian government to finally accept Punjabi as the language of Punjab. Quite amazing that it took Gujarat, Maharashtra, Tamil Nadu, these people had these rights from beginning, but it took till 1966 for Punjabi to be accepted in Punjab. However, also in that year, Punjab was divided further. India created 2 new states inside Punjab, calling them Haryana and Himachal Pradesh. Punjab is now less than 1/3 of its original size. Hopefully this plan will be coming up in front of you. If you look at this plan, you can see that Pakistan, the majority of Punjab went to Pakistan. Punjab used to stretch from the far reaches of Pakistan, almost bordering, touching Afghanistan, down to Sindh, And it went all the way across from New Delhi and actually touching Tibet. It was a huge area, and that was known as the Land of Five Rivers. First, half of Punjab went to Pakistan during 1947, and then, just as we said now, Punjab was then reduced to 19,000 villages, and only 2 rivers actually exist in Punjab now. And really, to even call it Punjab is really inaccurate. Really, it's only the land of 2 rivers and not 5 rivers. But Himachal Pradesh, which is of similar size to what Punjab is, and Haryana were taken out. So Punjab was essentially decimated. However, regardless of all this, regardless of, again, losing the capital city again, and it was divided, regardless of this, Sikhs still felt very, very loyal to India. Sikhs felt, "Is saadiyan qurbaniyan," is basically our ancestors that built India, that gave it freedom. It was Sikhs that died. It was Sikhs that were deported. It was Sikhs that were hanged. So they had a really strong loyalty to India. At that time, there were the Indo-Pakistan Wars and also the Indo-China Wars. The Indo-Pakistan Wars in 1962 and 1971, Sikhs fought on the front line. Sikhs displayed their loyalty every time they were asked to. And regardless of whether they were unhappy about what was happening to them in the various states, especially in Punjab, they really were proud of being Indians. In 1973, Sikhs declared the Anandpur Sahib Resolution. This was written by prominent Gursikhs like Sardar Kapoor Singh. A charter for Sikh culture and religious national rights, which is what it was. Sikhs made their demands quite clear, and these were the same demands, like I said previously, that were given to other states. However, in 1975, things changed. Indira Gandhi, who was then the Prime Minister, was found guilty of electoral fraud by the Indian courts. So, by the own courts, she was found guilty of electoral fraud. She, instead of resigning from her position, she imposed a state of emergency and assumed dictatorial powers. Opposition politicians and human rights activists were incarcerated. The right to life was suspended. Blanket censorship was put on the media, and widespread human rights abuses occurred. Sikhs were one of the most vocal people against this. They had the pride in India, and they wanted it to run properly. And they openly protested and in an open agitation against Indira Gandhi's dictatorship of that time. As a result, 50,000 Sikhs were arrested. Indira Gandhi had a revelation at this time. She realized the most vocal people and the biggest threat to her prime ministership and to her power are the Sikhs. And it was at that period in 1975 that she started thinking of ways to destabilize the Sikh nation. So she looked at who were the people who could really cause havoc in their community. And she came across people such as the Rangaris, who were openly disrespecting the Sri Guru Granth Sahib. And she started funding them and promoting them and giving them diplomatic status. And at that time, she built that movement up to really attack the Akali Dal party and really destabilize the Sikh community. As a result of their activities, in 1978, as a result of all their sacrilege against the Sri Guru Granth Sahib, 13 Singhs stood up amongst the hundreds who came there to protest. 13 Singhs were shaheed. Prominent Singhs like Bhai Fauja Singh were shaheed in Amritsar because they said, no, we cannot tolerate this further, and we must protest against those who are desecrating the Sahib Sri Guru Granth Sahib Ji. In 1982 to 1984, Sikhs had a massive disobedience movement in India for their human rights. In this disobedience movement, 300,000 Sikhs were arrested. Hundreds of Sikhs were killed in police cells. The Indian Army imposed a cap on the number of Sikhs in the army because they saw that these people are a threat to us now. Something that happened then, which was very controversial, especially in Punjab, 75% of the Punjab river waters were diverted to neighbouring states in violation of international riparian laws. So the people of Punjab, it wasn't just Sikhs that were upset, it was every person in Punjab, whether they were a Sikh Punjabi, whether they were Hindu Punjabi, or even a Muslim Punjabi. Because the reality is, even those that go to Punjab today will know that every time you go, you have to dig further and further down to access water. And slowly, the way the